We're going to call in our first speaker, who is the fabulous Eimear Colreavy. So Eimear, you might like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the research you've been undertaking into your practice, please.
Perfect. Díobh gach duine. Is me se Eimear. So my name is Eimear and I am from Sligo in the west of Ireland. And last year I took part in the 1-year part-time masters in the Frebel department in Maynooth University here in Ireland. So it gave me a chance to continue working in primary schools with my third class, but also do research on my practice at the same time. So today I'm going to explain to you what my research was on and basically just my research journey and what I learned. So I will share my screen. This is my third time to do it, and it worked well all the other times. So I hope it works. I hope it works this time as well. So let me know if you can see that. Is that all okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so I can go ahead and start. So if that suits you,
Yes.
Maureen. Yeah.
Great.
So my research question last year was, how do I encourage reflective practice and student autonomy through Machnamh? And Machnamh is the Irish word, it's Oscailga, for reflection or contemplation. So in this presentation, I'll explain what Machnamh is and how I made it up, and then the research I took on Machnamh. So Machnamh is a classroom practice that sees children reflect on their learning and then reteach their peers. So in a nutshell, it looks a little something like this. So it starts off here on picture 1. That's my classroom there, and it has lots of little coloured kind of seating spots on the ground. And anytime I taught a new topic, it could be in any subject area. So as a primary school teacher, I teach all the subjects. We'll say it's science. All the children would sit on their spots and I will sit down the back beside the flip chart piece of paper and I will write down any information that comes up. So it's a mixture of maybe them telling me things they know about the topic and also me teaching them things as well. So I fill in that flip chart piece of paper with writing, with drawings, with pictures, and then I put it on display. So that's the second picture there. I think the one picture I have there, it says protecting natural habitats. It might have been in geography. The one behind it might have been on time and maths. The one behind it might have been a drama lesson. Then every 2 weeks, I take those sheets down and I give one to each group of children, maybe 4 or 5 children, and they then have to reflect on it. So Machnamh meaning reflection. They talk to their group, they can add notes, they can add sentences or drawings, and really they had to become the experts on the topic because then they would stand up and reteach the class. So that was Machnamh. I did it in my classroom and I really wanted to do research on it as part of this master's. But I very quickly realized that this was the expectation versus reality for me. I thought that I would go in, do research, prove that Machnamh is unbelievable and get loads of praise. But actually, I was forced to actually reflect on my own practice and see where I could improve and where Machnamh can improve. And I know my face looks sad in that little clip art picture, but it was a good thing because I should have realized that doing this master's, it was under the Frebel department, which is named after Friedrich Frebel. And he believed that teachers should be reflective practitioners, constantly reflecting on their work and seeing where they can improve and what's working well. Because a lot of things were working well, but there was definitely room for improvement. And he also said that learning is a lifelong journey. It's not that I stop studying or stop kind of my learning journey just because I'm done in college. So rather than painting a perfect picture of my classroom in Machnamh, I really had to dive deeper into how I could improve my practice. And this all began with naming my values. So I listed 3 core values that I have. Of course, we all have many values, but I had to narrow it down to just 3. So I picked student autonomy, that children have a voice in the classroom and outside the classroom as well. Lifelong skill development, that the children in my class were learning skills that they can use across different subjects, as well as that, like outside of school and in the future. And that all of this was happening in an inclusive learning environment where everyone themselves felt valued. And once I had them listed, I noticed that yes, there was elements of all of these in Machnamh, but there was room for improvement. For example, when they used to stand up and present, after everything they said, they would look to me to see if they had done a good job. And in that way, student autonomy wasn't really being lived out in my practice. And as well as that, even though they were working in groups to reflect on a topic, it was always the same 1 or 2 children who were leading it while the rest just listened. And I think we've all experienced that in our classrooms. So there was room for improvement in my practice. So I engaged with literature and I decided on 2 interventions. So the first one was to enable them to create, monitor, and reflect on their own success criteria. And hopefully, my aim was that they wouldn't just look to me if they've done a good job or said the right thing. And the second one was to actually teach them how to collaborate with others. And I adapted Neil Mercer's skills for exploratory talk to do this, actually teach them skills that they can use to work in their groups. So Machnow still followed the same structure, but before they began, I would teach them one skill, one exploratory talk skill. So for example, I would say, okay guys, before Machnow today, I want you to really focus on the skill of actively listening. Like, what is that? What does it look like? We'd have a discussion about it and we'd really try to use that skill in that Machnow session. The next day, we might move on to how do we manage disagreements? The next one might be how do we give and receive feedback? And as well as that, they had their success criteria to fill in. So this was adapted from Katie White. So they would write down how will they know when they've succeeded, monitor their feelings and challenges throughout the process, and a goal for the end. Again, so they're deciding themselves how they've done rather than ask me. So I had four key findings from my research, and I had lots of different research tools to help me get these. But the main one was using my teacher reflective journal. And for this, I used Schoen's model of reflection in action and reflection on action. So in my reflective journal, on the left-hand side, I would write down what was happening during Machnow, what the kids are doing, what I'm saying. And on the right-hand side, I'd come back at a later date, read what I had written and see have my thoughts changed. And a lot of times they had. So I found that structure really worked well for me. So the first finding I had was the effect that teachers' praise has on autonomy. And even as you can see here, like when I asked the children before I began the interventions, how do you know when you've done a good job? 15 said the teacher tells them. And maybe even more worryingly, 10 said they weren't sure when they've done a good job. And only 4 said they review their own work. But I still found in cycle 1, they would look at me and I couldn't not say anything. So I was saying, good job, well done, you're doing great. So I re-engaged with the literature again. And I realized that you actually have to separate praise from feedback to cultivate student autonomy. And this isn't even something that I was aware there was a difference between, but actually give them feedback on the skills rather than just praising them. Because I found it very hard to stay quiet. So in cycle 1, rather than just saying, good job, if I want to give feedback, I would say something like, oh, I like the way you gave an example of what the other group member said. So I've given them feedback to help them develop that skill that they can use again. The second finding then was the importance of timing being both sufficient and goal oriented. So number 1, the children needed enough time to do their review of their topic. And as you can see from the word cloud on the left, this was the challenges they were facing in cycle 1. The bigger the word means, the more often it was said. So it was time, time, time. They did not have enough time to do the review before reteaching the class. And this had a knock-on effect on their feelings. As you can see, a lot of negative feelings. So I did what anyone would do. I just kept adding more time and more time. And it just got like, they would have been at it all day if they could have. So I re-engaged with the literature and I realized that it's not about managing time, but managing energy. And Katie White refers to this as incubation time. So just stopping, pausing, looking at your goals and deciding how are you going to spend your energy? How are you going to prioritize your goals to make sure you're ready on time at the end? So in cycle 1, it was very much like, okay, guys, you've 8 minutes, review your topic because you're going to be reteaching the class. In cycle 2, I did add more time, but I also gave them this little pause, 3-minute time in between to review their goals, check have they been achieving them, and how are they going to spend their energy in the next 6 minutes to make sure they're finished. The third finding then was the role that differentiation plays in promoting autonomy. Because I had this idea that if I want them to be autonomous, I have to step back because it's their voice that's important now, not mine. But very much differentiation and scaffolding was still needed if I wanted student autonomy to be present. Because while one child's success criteria looked like this, 3 kids could not do that. And in my reflection in action, I wrote about how I just paired the children up who were struggling with a well-able child, but that wasn't even linking to my values at all. They weren't learning lifelong skills. They weren't being included. There was no autonomy there. So I did have to differentiate. And for 3 children, their success criteria looked like this. Yes, it's different and it needed my input, but in that way, they're being autonomous and setting their own goals. Then on the other side, that was catering to the children struggling. I also had to change it up for the children who found it quite easy, because at one stage I asked the children in their own reflective journals, I asked them to write about why Machnav is important. And I got these two wonderful pieces of data here. I hope you sense the sarcasm. One child wrote, "When I completely understand the subject, I feel I don't have to reflect." And then another child changed the title I gave them to "Why Machnav Isn't Important," and said, "Machnav is not important because for fast learners like me, I remember everything. So Machnav is just wasting my time." And I was so disheartened when I read this. And I remember saying it to my critical friend, and she said, "Isn't it brilliant that they can be honest with you and you can work with them in finding an extra challenge for them?" So she's seen it in a positive light. And as well as that, I looked at the literature again, and it did say that when high attainers explain their understanding, it helps them remember in the long term. So I shared that with these children. I said, yes, you might remember it now, but when you explain it to your group mates, you'll actually remember it for longer. I also read that by making connections between learning and real life, that also deepens understanding. So for these children, for an extra challenge, I asked them to create a life link. So every time they got a topic, they had to link it to their lives now or link it to professions that it affects now. So yes, differentiation was definitely needed in order to promote autonomy. So I wasn't just watching them, I was scaffolding and helping them to encourage autonomy. And then the last finding then was the importance of teaching them skills on how to collaborate. Like when I asked them at the start about this sentence, the same few students do the talking and the rest just listen. Over 40% either strongly agreed or somewhat agreed with that. But over time, I taught them skills on how to work with each other and include, which was really important to ensure that they appreciated all group members. And I just have one quote from my teacher reflective journal that links to this. It says, "I did not ask them to give easier tasks to the children struggling, but all the groups did it anyway. This shows me that the importance of inclusion is being felt and taken on board by the children." And this quote stands out to me so much as a teacher researcher because it shows my values of inclusion actually being enacted by the children themselves. And I know it's not about the children, it was all about, like, it's about me living closer to my values. But when I seen it authentically being lived out by the children, it kind of highlighted the impact of the interventions. So they were my four findings, and bringing it back to my values, definitely more student autonomy is present, developing those skills on how to work with people, how to consolidate, how to synthesize, how to summarize and public speak, all happening in an inclusive learning environment. And then just to kind of finish up, as we said, this is a lifelong journey. Just because I'm done that 1 year master's doesn't mean that it's done for me. Like, I'm really trying to highlight the importance of Machnav and the road ahead, because in Ireland, Machnav isn't a subject. We very clearly have our subjects outlined in our timetable, but I feel like it's so highly integrated. You could have 6 different groups reflecting on 6 different subject areas. And even if we look at our principles of learning, teaching, and assessment, if you just pick one of those, I can guarantee that Machnav links to it. It links to pedagogy, learning environments, engagement and participation. As well as that, it links to so many of the key competencies: being active, being well, being creative. So I find that it's so integrated, it can be included into our curriculum. And then, sorry, just the participation framework there based on Lundy's model. Like, they need a space for their voice to be heard and an audience to listen to them and to have influence on that audience. And yes, this is based on, young people's participation in decision making, but should also be happening in the classroom. So I'm going to finish up on one quote because I know my time is up. As I said, this was my expectation. And yes, there was many positive aspects to Machnav, but also it very much was me reflecting on my own practice. Friedrich Frebel said that we should start with the child. We should always start with the child. But I did find this quote that perhaps challenges his quote slightly. "It might seem obvious to start with the student, but that would not be the correct place to start. Teachers' beliefs and commitments are the greatest influence on student achievement." And I think what Hattie is saying here is that yes, while starting with the child is important, or acknowledging the child, actually it's the teacher's mindset and their beliefs about education that play a more decisive role in shaping how and what children learn. And from that, then from how they view the child and helping them become who they are, we can focus on the child then. So I just have my references at the end, and I can share my presentation with Maureen anyways, if people want the references, and I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That was just absolutely mind-blowing, Emer.